folks. How we doing?
Hey, Nick. Doing great.
Hey, Nick. Doing great.
What do you guys think of the event so far?
It's amazing.
Yeah, good. It's fantastic. Learning a whole lot.
Yeah, me too. And we're going to get to learn from you two here. So the learning continues to go. Let's get right in because I don't believe in me blabbering, which is what I'm doing right now. I believe in getting right into the action. So we have heard a lot of stuff around AI and selling challenges today. And I think about my experience talking to all sorts of sales teams and salespeople. And a lot of them are struggling right now to keep their heads above water, right? They've got to focus on their prospecting. They got to work their deals. They've got big negotiations. Their boss says, hey, you got to get your forecast in. They're trying to keep the CRM clean. They're trying to learn about their industry and their buyer. And there is so much that a seller could be doing to fill their day. It can be chaotic. And I'm curious about how the two of you coach your teams to navigate the chaos of selling.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, our sales teams, making sure they're keeping everything in their head above water with pretty much everything that they've got going on. I think time management is a big piece of that. One of the big coaching parts of the coaching and enablement parts that we focus on with our sales team is making sure they're managing their time efficiently, right? And prioritizing what they're working on at any given time. So as an example, if it's the start of the month and you're building pipeline, you should be focusing on creating that pipeline through forecasting, chasing those inbound leads that have come through, that sort of stuff. Whereas if you're looking at the tail end of the month, your priorities need to shift. So managing that pipeline is super important, and making sure that you're diverting that focus to the right place at the right time is a super important part of how we coach our sales teams on this.
Yeah. Michelle, how about you?
Yeah, so I agree with everything Vedant just shared, and I think time management is definitely top of mind. With all the swirl that can be happening, sales reps can be pulled into focusing maybe not on the right things because they're trying to make something happen that just won't. So we talk a lot about control your controllables. And so you can't control the shifts in the market. You can't control what's happening at some of the organizations that you have open opportunities, but you can clarify what you control and what you can't, and build on what you can control and find the ways around what you can't. So for instance, Vendor is a company that does a lot of the contracts or helps negotiate contracts and close those out. They recently shared that the average contract size value has dropped 20% quarter over quarter. This has been a trend. So what you've been doing and maybe why you're not hitting your goals is because deals are closing at a smaller size. So you need to create 20% more pipeline. You can completely control that. You can go out and you can find that. It might just take you a little bit more work. And it also means that you might need to close one or two more deals. And so that will come from what you can control and get you back in that driver's seat.
Yeah. It's interesting. You both talk about like the time management thing. And when we had Damon John on earlier, he was talking about like you make those choices with where you spend your time. The outputs that you get come from the inputs that you give, aka where you spend your time. And I think one of the challenges in sales right now, and I'm sure you guys see this with your teams, is you've got salespeople who don't necessarily know like what they should be doing. Should I be social selling? Should I be trying to be a content creator so I get a bunch of inbound leads? Should I be learning my industry so that I know the space better than anyone else? Should I just make more cold calls? I'm curious about like, when you think about your team, I believe that you can't just peanut butter it and do everything. And so I'm curious, Vedant, maybe we can start with you. And for those of you who don't know, Vedant and his team are actually using Rhythm right now. And this doesn't necessarily have to be included in how you answer the question. I'm just curious about like, what do you tell your team to focus on, knowing that they probably need to narrow their focus?
Yeah, so it's like I said earlier, right? It's about making sure that depending on what time of the month it is or what time of the sales cycle it is. So for us, for example, we have a pretty high volume, and we're a monthly sales cycle. So
Okay.
generally about average time to close about 30 days, which is pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that means for us, it is a speed to lead game, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that we're focusing on is going, hey, you have a pipeline, you have an X number of inbound leads. So if those are
Mhm.
coming in, that should be within the next 5-10 minutes. Make sure that those leads are getting engaged and you're touching those, um, making those touch points. From there, it's about looking at where you are in the month.
Yeah.
So if I'm at the end of the month, closing activities are going to take priority because that's we need to bring those numbers in. We need to hit those revenue goals.
Mhm.
Whereas if it's at the start of the month, we're talking about, okay, cool. Now depending on where your pipeline's at, you can decide. You have a bit of leeway in terms of um, how much prospecting you need to do to refill that pipeline versus how much that content creation you got to do to bring those inbound lead in and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with it.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, like, you're talking sort of about a monthly rhythm where you've got sellers who are like, all right, pulse check. How am I doing in the month? Do I need to lean in a little bit to? I got to generate some pipeline. Am I in a place where I'm like, hey, I should be focusing a little bit more on like trying to get my deals closed or push them through? And so that's sort of on a monthly rhythm. I'm
Yes.
curious about from like a daily structure. Michelle, I want to ask you, like, how do you advise your sellers structure an individual day?
Yeah, so I run an enterprise sales team, so
Mhm.
that looks a little bit different.
Mhm.
And I also run our BDR team. So the BDR team is very much, the number of touches we look at a week, and then how you break that down, how many emails, how many calls, how many contacts, how many cadences, how many steps.
Mhm.
That is very orchestrated and structured versus an enterprise salesperson. And as far as what their day looks like, it just right now, so they start with rhythm. What are the top priorities? What are the things I need to do? They take those actions. That is helping them tremendously. It's cutting activities like 44%. It's increasing the number of meetings that they're setting. But with that, I want them spending time with customers. I want
Mhm.
them engaging with customers. I want them connecting. I want them doing the follow-ups. I want them to have at least 8 meetings or more a week.
Mhm.
I want them on the road, making meaningful connections to help move them forward. So they still have to drive their own pipeline, and that's just a reality in this world. We're not going to get there just on marketing or outbound motions or events. The AEs need to do the work too. So I would say they have their engagement. That's a big chunk of it. I would say that's probably close to about 30% of their day, if not, hopefully more.
Mhm.
And then they're researching their top tier accounts, doing the research, know their customers better than they know themselves. And then strategizing. They need to prepare for those upcoming meetings.
Mhm.
So they need to prepare and practice and make sure that they're aligned with the customer's top priorities, and that we're hitting that, and that we're really going deep on the pain, and that we're solving their problems, because at the end of the day, the customer for us is always at the center in how we're showing up and how we're meeting them.
I'm curious about that research element, Michelle, because when I'm preparing for a meeting, if I'm meeting with you and you're my prospective customer, I mean, I could probably spend hours and hours and hours and weeks researching you and learning your favorite food and your pet's name and every little last thing about you. And the reality is, like, that's not a great use of my time to be like,
Mhm.
chicken wings and you've got a corgi and it's named Dave. And like, you're gonna be like, okay, what does that have to do with what we're selling? Like, how do you advise your teams? I'm curious, two-part question. One, what is the appropriate level of depth in research in prepping for one of those meetings? And how do you how do you recommend your teams know when to stop on the research and move into, okay, I've got another customer meeting I probably need to prep for, because it could be a bottomless hole.
Yeah, it can. So if it's a prospect, it's looking at the 10Ks, looking at the annual reports,
Mhm.
finding out what is the CEO, what is the CRO, what is this, and one of the most important roles right now is the chief financial officer. What do
Mhm.
they care about? What does the rev ops care about? What do they, what are their top priorities and what are their initiatives? So if we can get that information, then you have a pretty good point of view. And we use a process where we build out that point of view to start the conversation and see if we have an alignment, or at least start the conversation. Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? What are we missing? And so that's really how we approach getting into our accounts and working the AEs and the BDRs working together.
Yeah.
So the AEs will leverage the BDR team, and they work as a unit to put that information together and to start that first initial conversation.
The point of view is an underrated, underutilized tool, because I think a lot of salespeople think, okay, I show up to the meeting and I say something like, tell me about your priorities. And that's like level one selling, probably. If you get a little bit more sophisticated, you might say, hey, typically when I meet with a CRO, they're focused on A, B, and C problems. I'm curious for you, are you focused on any of those? But then level three is saying, hey, like, I've seen this about you. I understand this about your business. My suspicion is you guys are focused on this, or you're struggling with this. Like, but that's just my point of view coming into this meeting. Like, tell me where I got it right or wrong. And what happens there is one of two things will happen. If you got it right, they're like, wow, this person gets it. And the meeting just tracks from there. But if you get it wrong, it's actually okay, because you still like did the research and you came with like stuff that you knew about them. So like you demonstrate this person did their research, but then they will correct you and say, actually, no, we're focused on this. And either way, you get to the heart of the problem that they are looking to solve. I'm a big point of view fan, if you can't tell.
I didn't know that.
Vedant, I'm curious, you guys have a totally different sales cycle, right? This is a 30-day sales cycle. My guess is if I'm preparing for a first meeting with an inbound lead and I take whatever the 45 minutes I need to craft a really educated point of view, chances are they're like, why haven't you called me yet? Can you talk to me about like, what are the things that your team is doing in that first touch with that person to make sure that it's an effective interaction?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we approach it is, you're absolutely right. It is a much quicker process, right? And there's a lot more, there are a lot more meetings in a day that are stacked in an AE's calendar. So the time is super, super important. So the way we tackle this is by looking at personas. So obviously we can't account for every single person that we're going to meet, but we can take a look at it, look at the data and go, okay, we have on average, we meet an X number of small business owners, X numbers of enterprise clients, X number of CFOs, etc. We build those personas out, and when we're in the enablement coaching sessions with our rep, we're going, hey, if you're talking to someone within this persona, chances are you're going to need to know this, and this about their business. And to sprinkle some additional rapport building in there, go onto their LinkedIn for like their LinkedIn socials for like 2 to 3 minutes, find something that you can talk about as a commonality. And then from that point, that's your initial rapport building icebreaker. But then with the personas, crafting those personas and coaching and enabling on those, we can make sure that reps are saving a whole bunch of their time in that research phase. So that's how we're tackling it.
Nice. I like it. I mean, so you're saying, hey, let me find this. Look at this person's LinkedIn for 2 minutes. I can probably glean something that like makes them say, okay, this person isn't like totally clueless. It's funny because I've been doing something similar for a lot of my sales meetings when I'm out there selling. And what I'll try to do is I will prep just one. I don't try to find Michelle's favorite food and her dog's name and like where she grew up. I find one piece of small talk that I could make. And there's some prospects that love making small talk. There's others that like, they hate it. And you don't always know what you're going to get. So you got to be prepared to make that small talk. But what I've been doing is it can be tough. Like I'm thinking about your 30-day sales cycles. Like every minute that you have with a customer is precious. And if I spend 5 minutes talking about Michelle loves buffalo chicken wings, like that's 5 minutes that like, yeah, we have some rapport, but we haven't talked about business at all. So what I've been trying to do is prep one piece of small talk that's related to their business. So if I was selling something to Salesloft, my small talk is when I meet Michelle, if I'm selling to her, instead of talking about chicken wings, I'm going to say, holy cow, I just saw this big rhythm launch you guys are doing. I have to imagine there's implications for what you're doing. Like, what's that been like? And so I'm not getting into, I might not even sell something related to, the rhythm launch. But Michelle's like, okay, this person knows me. We're talking about the business and I'm going to be able to glean stuff about their company while also sort of building that rapport side of things. So I've been trying to do more targeted, relevant rapport building. But anyways, it's not about me. This is about you guys. I want to ask you both about prospecting, because I talk to so many salespeople who are like, Nick, I don't have time for prospecting. Don't you know I've got kids and I've got to travel for meetings and I'm working all these deals. I got a quota to carry. How on earth am I supposed to fit in prospecting? And I have to imagine, maybe this doesn't happen on your teams. They're better than the sellers I talk to, but you might get the occasional seller who's like, I don't have time to fit in prospecting. What do you tell them? Vedant, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So the way we've tackled it, we've 100% dealt with this. I myself have been in AE at one point, and I'll be fully transparent. Prospecting was not my favorite part of the job, right? So, but that being said, it is super important to do to build that pipeline and generate the inbound leads that we need. So, the way we deal with it with our AEs and with our reps is to go, okay, cool. You either pre-rhythm, we were effectively going, carve out a set amount of your time on your calendar, so that that's the amount of time you got to dedicate. Head down prospecting, turn off any distractions.
Yep.
Now the way we deal with it is we've got cadences within Salesloft that we're using, so they're automated steps. The email pieces within those steps are crafted by the AE. So we're taking almost like a close to set and forget approach, where it's like, cool, you've crafted these cadences individually, and we have analytics on what works and what doesn't. So when we have these enablement touch points, we can craft, okay, cool, based off of all of these different cadences that we've built, here's what's working, here's what's not, so you can now tweak your cadences accordingly. But we also make sure that there is a element of manual touch points, like your phone calls or sending them a LinkedIn message, connecting on LinkedIn, that sort of stuff, built into those cadences, right? So we have a couple of different required activities in there. So that way, instead of it being hey, I have to do cold prospecting from scratch, so for so many hours every day or so many minutes every day, it's now like, cool, I'm going to spend an hour at the start of my month where the amount of activities I've got or number of tasks I've got is minimal. I'll spend that hour, tweak my cadences, and make sure I'm setting people, and the 30 minutes or hour within your calendar every month that was previously dedicated to prospecting is now becoming, I'm going to go and look for people to put into these cadences. So that's kind of how we're handling prospecting at the moment. That's been a bit of a shift from, hey, do it manually, and I know it's not the best, but get into it, and it's changed to a, hey, tweak it and make sure you're adding people to it and make sure you're keeping up with all the enablement coaching tools that we're providing.
Michelle, how about you and your teams?
I mean, exactly what Vedant said in terms of that process. Obviously, Salesloft makes it easier. And so you could be at meetings or you could be traveling and you're still prospecting. So even though you're not sitting in front of the computer, you're still going. And so that's the great thing, right? Is that it's not a real manual process. You can set it, but also we help them with how many targets that they need to hit, how many emails do you need to send in a week, how many calls, so that if they do have other priorities that are customer facing, Fridays are always a great day for enterprise sales. Like enterprise sales, Fridays you usually don't have a lot of meetings. That is a day that you could set it up for the following week, and you're looking ahead and you're planning out your next week, and you're still hitting all your targets. You're doing your meetings, you're progressing your deals forward. You still are doing that research. You're still strategizing with your teams. And by the way, you can set a few hours and you can get those emails or those calls set up or LinkedIn touches, whatever they are, and still hit all your targets in that week. The other thing that seems to be really resonating are calls, direct calls, picking up the phone. Picking up the phone right now is yielding really great results as well. So working that in, like Vedant, you mentioned this about doing a call. It is great. Or on the BDR side, we're going back to setting up call blitz days. So doing those 1 or 2 days, getting teams together, collaborating, and that's making an impact, dropping those in once or twice a month and doing that type of work. So mixing it up.
Michelle, I have to imagine you have some folks on your team who are pretty unique, creative. They might do stuff like intentionally blur their camera when they're sending a prospecting video, like I've evidently done to myself. But like, I wonder, like, what's the most creative thing that someone on your team has done to book a meeting?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's been a lot. There's been, gifts that have been sent. We do a lot of gifting, but I would say one of the most creative would be getting to know, who the person is. I don't have one off the top of my head, right off the top of my head, but one of them is always around like really understanding who that person is. And like for instance, they've went to a University of Texas. They're a Longhorn, fan. And so just, putting together something that is, a gift that might be, labeled. But outside of that, one of the other things someone just recently reminded me of actually was that they knew this person was going on a trip.
Yeah.
So they knew that they were going on the country. They got a response and they said, I'm not going to be, I can't meet. I'm going to be on vacation. I'll be out of the country. And I think, they might have mentioned where they were going. And so this person did the research. This doesn't cost any money. They did the research. They knew where they were going and they made a list of recommendations of what to see. And also like they had kids, so it's like kid friendly activities that go along with it. So it might not be the most creative, but it's a really thoughtful way to help somebody out. And then they booked a meeting because they took the time and detailed out basically an agenda and a little travel book.
Well, there's an awesome prospecting play right there where like I'm thinking about, okay, I know the prospect is going to Costa Rica. Like I don't even now have to do that research. Like we're talking about AI today. Like I can go to something like ChatGPT and say, where are the best places to, take your kids in Costa Rica? This person's staying in this neighborhood, and you can get that really quick. And I feel like that actually can extend to a lot of different prospecting cases. Like one of the prospecting emails I was most proud of was I found I was selling to law firms, and I found this. A lot of the lawyers that I would research, like there wasn't a lot you would find about these people. And I found there was this one guy who loved cheeseburgers. And so I sent him this email with the subject line, the ultimate cheeseburger. And like, I was listing out like his perfect day, and he was going to eat a cheeseburger. He was going to do this. And then I snuck in part of the perfect day was the product I was selling, like fixing an issue that I thought his business had. And I booked a meeting and I was so proud of it. But it's like, okay, when you find some of those pieces of personal information, you can actually almost over rotate into like, that's a big audacious, here's all sorts of things you can do on your vacation. That is a really sharp play that I might actually have to start stealing. So, Vedant, how about your team? Are there any creative things that you've seen folks do to build pipeline?
Yeah, one that I saw at one point in my last 5 odd years here is one that I've seen is we were prospecting, we were sending out emails. One of the AEs took the time he identified a few key accounts that he wanted to go after.
Yeah.
And for those ones specifically, he recorded a very short video, which just had him with the words, "Hey," name of the prospect on a whiteboard on a video. And he just had that up there in that little video and sent that through in the actual email. Subject line was very similar, very personalized, very creative.
Yep.
So subject line was creative. That got someone to click on it. And then the next step was, oh, hey, this isn't just a automated something's typed up for you kind of thing. You've actually taken the time to, personalize it to me and spent the time. So which was pretty successful. So that was one of the more creative ones.
How are you guys using rhythm to help your sellers fit all of this in amidst all the other stuff that they have to do? Like Michelle, you mentioned like you have folks that are traveling across the country. They're basically living on an airplane. Vedant, you've got people who like when they get an inbound lead, they got to respond quickly. Like how do you guys use rhythm to help folks fit this into their workflow?
Yeah. So for us, rhythm's been super useful when it comes to taking that sort of prioritization, the thinking, the focus of planning your day out of the time that you spend at the start of their day, right? So that's easily about 30 minutes to an hour that they're saving on planning their day. So with the AEs who've got like you said at the beginning of this, the deals to close, the forecasting to get in, the prospecting to fit in, and all of that sort of stuff in there, having something just tell you based off of activity, like it previously it was, I'm going to look at my emails and see who's responded. I've seen previously where it used to be where I'm just going to leave my inbox unread and then get to them eventually, like throughout the day. That's no longer a thing. We have Rhythm, which will now just give you a list of, hey, this is everything you need to do today, prioritized by who's most responsive to you. That takes that thinking piece and that planning piece away, which means now all you have to do is click a button. It starts you off on your rhythm for the day, and 30 minutes in, you're done with all of your emails that are sent out, the calls that are made, the calls that need to be made. Everything's done in a one by one by one by one, and instead of spending an hour, because 30 minutes of prioritization and 30 minutes of actual execution is now cut down to about 25 to 30 minutes, and you're done. The added piece of that we're finding with Rhythm is, now that we have the generative AI in the email compositions as well, we're starting to see that that's being used when it comes to personalizing cadence emails and getting those sent out. So previously, where cadence emails or tasks were, we had something set and you had to go in and manually personalize those. Now we've got the generative AI that'll help us personalize those even quicker. So we're shaving off like those minutes or 30 seconds you shave off per email or whatever it is that you're doing. Those add up pretty quickly.
I'm curious, what's the impact then for your team?
Oh, they're spending more. So I think it's they're spending about 40 to 60% of the day in actual meetings and phone calls with clients, as opposed to with admin tasks and those sort of things, because it's all taken care of.
I'm curious if you've collected any qualitative feedback. Like, it sounds like, okay, wow, these people are spending way more time in front of or getting in front of customers, but I don't know. I think about my experience as a seller. One of the most frustrating things is like clicking around on my computer to try to figure out who I'm going to call and where's the phone number, and oh crud, I just got an email, I need to address that. Like, what's it meant for like your team from like a personal level?
Yeah. It's the thing that the feedback that we got as soon as we launched Rhythm and it started, we got the adoption numbers up and people are starting to use it. The first piece of feedback that I got from our AEs was, I no longer have to, like, it's getting to a point where I just have to click a button and then it tells me what to do and I just do it. I just have to execute rather than put the time and effort required to plan that prioritization, plan that focus. And that's been huge for them, because it's now a case of come in, the AI tells you what to do or what to prioritize. All the information's there. It's at a click of a button.
Yeah,
it makes life a lot easier.
One of the things we talk about on 30 Minutes to President's Club quite a bit is plan your attack and then attack your plan. And I think too many people try to do both at the same time. And it's really tough to go back and forth between execute planning. And so like when I see people like they've got a list of a bunch of cold calls they got to make and they're like researching, calling. Well, those are two totally different headspaces. One, you sort of got to be up, you got to be resilient, you got to be ready for battle. The other one, like you're in deep thinker, researcher mode. And I don't know about any of you in the audience, but like I can't go back and forth that much. And if I do, it's exhausting. And where it sounds like this is helping is it's giving your team, I'm sure they're still doing some planning of their attack, right? This doesn't totally and utterly automate. I don't have to think whatsoever. But if you can even have a 50% incremental increase on spending less time figuring out what I do next, you can actually focus on executing with skill, cranking the wheel and doing the things that like Michelle and Vedant, I know you guys are coaching your teams to upskill in a lot of these areas. And Michelle, I think about one of the prep calls we had for this, where you were talking about look, Nick, if you're on my sales team, I'm probably going to coach you on A, B, and C. But if I've got somebody else on the team, I'm going to coach them on D, E, and F, because you've got different gaps and strengths and things you want to do and like to do as a seller. And you can't have a one size fits all. Hey, let's bring 200 people on our sales team to a training call. We're all going to work on the same thing. Michelle, can you talk to me about how you know where to focus on your coaching efforts?
Yeah, we lead into situational leadership. So it's identifying, if you're familiar with the 1-minute manager, it really works well with Salesloft, and especially with rhythm. So you can figure out,
Michelle, I'm not familiar with the 1-minute manager, even though I nodded my head when you said it. And so for those of us in the audience,
it's on my desk.
oh my gosh, can you give me the 1-minute summary?
Yeah, basically it's diagnosing where your sales reps are in their journey. So they might be new. So they're low activity right now, but they're high activity right now, but they're learning. So there's low outcomes, but that's just because they're getting into the beginning of the curve. And then on the other end of it, they're experts, they're subject matter experts. And so on those different ends of the spectrum, they're subject matter experts. They've been there for a while. They have high activity, high outcome. You just need to be supportive. You don't need to give them direction. You just need to be there and help them untie knots. Versus if they're new, they need a lot of direction, and they need you to tell them what they need to do. And then there's like a middle balance in between those. There's two others, but that's just kind of giving you the look. And so what that means is that you can then approach the individual and understand where they are, and so that you're meeting them at where they need direction or they need support. And they might need both. If they're in the middle, they might need direction on certain areas, aspects. Like maybe it's they're not getting with the economic buyer. You notice a pattern, their deals are not closing. They're progressing and they have good deals, but they're just not flipping. So in Salesloft, you can diagnose, you can see where is the breakdown, and you can see opportunity after opportunity. They're not spending time with the economic buyer. There's no calls, there's no emails, maybe not one. There might not even be one identified. And so you can talk with them, understand what is going on. Maybe there's been a bad experience, or maybe they just have a little bit of fear they need to overcome, and you work with them on that, or they need some support. Versus, somebody who's just not showing up and participating, and they're not hitting their daily, weekly, monthly activities. That would be very directional. I need you to do, is there something wrong or you're not understanding? And then moving into, I need you to hit these goals and these targets. And so that's the dynamics. Versus if you have one or two people on your team who are not showing up or participating, they have low participation rate. What would be a negative impact on the entire team would be you sharing that directive with the whole team, and then leaving half of the team feeling confused. Why are you giving me this direction? And then they feel, demoralized. They don't feel appreciated. They feel confused, which then could lead to other issues. And so there's a lot of reporting and analytics within Salesloft that you can diagnose where they're spending time and what activity they're doing and where they are compared to the rest of the team or segment of the business.
Phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. And so we got to move to our final question. And I'm actually going to ask the question that I get to ask at the very last question of every single episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club's podcast. And the question is this. I'm going to ask both of you to answer. And Michelle, I'm going to put you on the spot first. So Vedant, you have a little more time to think of your answer. We've talked about a lot of really great things salespeople and sales teams should be doing, but now I'm going to ask you about a shouldn't. And so my final question is this. What is one bad habit that you see a lot of salespeople exhibiting that you think they need to break because it hurts them more than it helps? I told you were going first. We can let Vedant go first if you want.
No. I would say one bad habit actually was a conversation I had with another sales leader yesterday. And, it's so simple. Just ask for the business. Where are you? You know, where are you in the cycle? Sometimes it's as simple as like they'll just keep dragging out the process and like they're expecting the customer say, okay, I'm ready to go. I want to buy from you. And you just need to ask the question.
Yeah.
And what's keeping us from working together? Or, you know, have you seen enough to move forward? Like, just ask the question.
Yeah. It's so funny you say, like, so we just had an episode of our show where we had a guest come on and he was telling me that same advice. And he goes, he had a meeting with a CRO and the CRO came on and the seller did a time check in the beginning. Hey, do we still have an hour for this, demo meeting we were going to do? And the CRO goes, nope, we've got 12 minutes. And he goes, can you get it done in this time? And the seller responded, well, it depends. Are you ready to buy? And the CRO said, yes. And so they skipped the long belabored demo and they spent the 12 minutes talking about, all right, like, what do we need to do to get there? And you're so right. Like, I think sometimes we over rotate as sellers into being indirect and making assumptions. And you're right. When you ask that question, and it comes from a place of like, not trying to force the customer to buy right now. It's, where are you in the process? I want to figure out like what we need to do next to help you out. You end up getting way more clarity. And again, you can focus your efforts and actions on the stuff that actually moves the needle. And that is a great question to ask. And now, Vedant, I've got to ask you a great question, which is that last question. What's one bad habit that you see a lot of sellers exhibiting you think they need to break because it hurts them more than it helps?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Michelle stole my answer, so I'm gonna pick this second on my list. And this is going to be a very ops person perspective. It's data hygiene in your CRM. The reason I say this is because we provide a lot of visibility to our reps, right? At any given point, we're transparent about, hey, this is where you are. You have access to these same dashboards. We love our leaderboards, so everyone's got access to those, so they can see where they are and where everybody else is. If you're not maintaining data hygiene, I know it's not directly going to affect the demo, the sale that you're working on at the moment, but what it does from a long-term perspective is it reduces your own visibility into some of the pitfalls. So if you're not logging those calls, you're not logging those analytics behaviors, you can't look back at it and go, okay, this is what was going wrong, so you're not improving. So either you're getting worse or you're staying where you are in a flat line. So I think so I think data hygiene is a super, super important thing because that'll give you the visibility to long-term improve.